Dragged to town in chains, she exposes the forgery. Then he calls her the love of my life. A master's rage burns like wildfire as he discovers his ledger filled with lies. Iron chains clank around a small girl's wrists as the wagon rolls toward the courthouse steps. But when the clerk's red wax gleams too bright and the ribbon knots face the wrong way, her perfect memory becomes a weapon sharper than any blade. Thunder rolls overhead. The overseer's smile turns deadly. In the lamplight, numbers don't lie, but men do. A fever strikes. A Bible opens to pages sewn with blue thread. The crowd gathers as church bells ring through the storm. When the seal presses into wax and a man's heart breaks open before witnesses, will his oath of love destroy them both, or forge a covenant stronger than chains? The iron kettle hissed on the kitchen hearth as dawn crept through the shutters of the grey plantation house. Mary's bare feet whispered across the flagstones, her small hands steady as she measured cornmeal into the wooden bowl. The blue ribbon in her hair caught the firelight, a scrap of sky her mistress had given her before the fever took her last winter. Footsteps thundered down the hall, heavy, angry. The sound that meant trouble brewing like storm clouds. "Where is she, Master?" Elias Gray's voice cracked like a whip. "Where's the girl?" Mary set down the measuring cup. Her fingers found the ribbon at her temple, tucking it tight against her scalp. The kitchen door burst open, bringing with it the scent of horse sweat and morning dew. Elias Gray stood in the doorway, ledger book clutched in one hand, iron chains draped over his shoulder like a snake. His face was pale stubble and sleepless eyes. Behind him, Overseer Pike's boots scraped the threshold. "There," Pike pointed, "the little songbird herself." Mary remained still as pond water. She had learned early that stillness saved skin. "You," Elias said, voice rough as bark. "Step forward." She moved 3 careful steps, close enough to see the ledger's ink smears, far enough to dodge if his hand swung wide. Elias slammed the book onto the kitchen table. "Someone's been playing games with my numbers. Double entries. Cotton, sold twice on paper. My name signed to debts I never made." His finger stabbed at the columns. "These figures don't add up." Pike chuckled low. "Course they don't. Girl's been helping herself to education she ain't meant to have, reading ledgers, forging papers. That ain't so." Mary's voice came steady as her heart beat. "I can read numbers, yes, sir, but I ain't touched your book." Elias leaned close. She smelled tobacco and desperation on his breath. "Then explain why my cotton shows sold to Charleston and Savannah both. Same bales, same dates." Mary studied the page. The 6s looked strange too, round, curling wrong, not like storekeeper Jameson's neat figures she'd glimpsed when Dinah sent her to town. These 6s had the flourish she'd seen on other papers. "Begging pardon, Master Gray," she said, careful as stepping on ice, "but those 6s got the shape of town writing. Clerk Avery's hand, not Jameson's." Pike's laugh died. Elias straightened. "You saying someone else wrote in my book?" "Yes, sir. The storekeeper makes his 6s different, straight-backed. These curl fancy." For a heartbeat, something flickered in Elias's eyes. Hope, maybe, or doubt. Then Pike stepped forward, chain links ringing against each other. "Don't let her fool you, Gray. Girl's clever as a fox, and twice as sly. She's been tampering, mark my words." The hope died. Elias's jaw hardened. "Clever or not, she's coming to town. I'll make an example of her. Show the quarters what happens to thieves." The chain fell heavy around Mary's wrists, iron cold as winter creek water. She bit her lip to keep from crying out. "Please, Master." Silence. Elias gathered the ledger and headed for the door. "Pike, get the wagon ready. We're settling this today." As they dragged her toward the yard, Mary heard Dinah's sharp intake from the washhouse door. Old Ned's hammer stopped its rhythm at the forge. The quarters knew. Word would spread like creek water finding level ground. The wagon wheels creaked as they rolled down the plantation road. Mary sat between the 2 men, chains weighing her hands in her lap. The ribbon had come loose. She tucked it careful into her sleeve. Pine trees lined the road, their shadows falling in bars across the wagon bed. Mary began to hum soft. So soft, Pike might think it was just the wind. A lullaby Preacher Jonah had taught her, back when he came to the quarters with his worn Bible and gentle voice. Asterisk, follow the cypress knee, cross where the water runs free. Asterisk. The words painted pictures in her mind. The old preacher had sung this song a dozen times, walking with her through the woods, pointing out landmarks. She'd thought it was just music. Now she wondered if it might be more. Asterisk. 2 lanterns burning bright, safe harbor in the night. Asterisk. Stop that noise, Pike snapped. Mary's humming faded, but the melody stayed locked in her memory. The song knew these roads, knew the ferry crossing ahead, the courthouse beyond. Maybe it knew other things too. The morning grew warm. Wagon wheels found every rut and stone. Mary's mind worked steady as a metronome, counting beat and measuring verse. The hymn had 17 stanzas. Each one marked a milestone on the road to town. They reached the river landing as fog lifted from the water. The ferry waited, tied to cypress pilings thick as church columns. Boatman Josiah stood at the pole, his weathered hands steady on the wood. "Morning, Josiah," Elias called. "Need passage." The boatman's eyes found the chains, found Mary's face. His mouth pressed thin. "Cost you 2 bits. For a child. For chains on Sunday morning." Josiah's voice carried no give. 2 bits. Elias paid, jaw tight. They rolled onto the ferry's deck, wood planks groaning under the wagon's weight. As Josiah pushed off from shore, Mary hummed again, barely breath, nearly silence. Asterisk. Ferry pole and river wide. Trust the current, trust the guide. Asterisk. The water slapped against the boat's sides. Steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. Like the count of measures in the old songs. "That girl's always singing," Pike muttered. "Unnatural, if you ask me." "No one asked," Elias said quiet. They reached the far bank as church bells began to ring across town. Sunday morning calls to worship. Mary thought of Preacher Jonah in his little country chapel, wondered if he'd pray for her today. The courthouse steps rose before them like Judgment Day itself. People gathered, some heading to church, others drawn by the sight of chains on a child. Their voices buzzed like hornets in a hive. "What you got there, Gray?" called Patroller Webb from his horse. Elias's back straightened. The crowd pressed closer. Thunder rumbled low in the distance, promising storm. "Taking my property to town," Elias said, louder than needed. "Settling accounts." Webb grinned ugly. "Little property giving you trouble?" More folks gathered, shop owners peering from doorways, church ladies with their Sunday bonnets, children peeking between their mothers' skirts, all watching, all waiting. Elias felt the weight of their stares. His voice carried over the crowd, strong as a preacher's call. "I'll bring her back the love of my life if truth says so, or answer God if not." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mary's breath caught. She didn't understand what he meant, but she heard the oath in it. Something binding as iron, stronger than chains. Pike's smile faded. "Gray, I said what I said." Elias looked at the crowd, then at Mary. "Let's get inside before this storm breaks." They climbed the courthouse steps as the first fat raindrops spattered the stones. Behind them, the crowd lingered, voices low but carrying. "Did you hear what he said?" Called her the love of his life. Strange talk for a master about property. Inside the courthouse, Clerk Avery waited in his office, a thin man with soft hands and sharp eyes. His desk held neat stacks of paper, ribbons in different colors, sticks of sealing wax lined up like soldiers. "Mr. Gray," Avery smiled, showing teeth like old ivory. "And Mr. Pike, I've been expecting you." Pike set his satchel on the desk. "Got the evidence right here, forged papers. Proof the girl's been helping runaways." Avery opened the satchel, drew out a folded paper sealed with red wax. "This pass was found in the quarters. Claims to be signed by Preacher Jonah, giving safe harbor to travelers. But see here?" He held up the document. "The signature's shaky. The wax is wrong. Clear forgery." Mary studied the paper from where she sat, chains heavy in her lap. The red wax caught lamplight, but something about it looked off. The ribbon underneath was tied wrong knot, facing the wrong direction. "Preacher Jonah's innocent," she said soft. All 3 men turned to her. "How's that?" Avery's voice carried silk and venom both. "The wax, sir. It's too bright. County seal wax is darker red, like old blood. And the ribbon knot faces left on real papers. I seen the church ledger when Preacher Jonah recorded baptisms. This here's backwards." Silence fell like a curtain. Rain drummed harder on the roof. Pike's face darkened. Don't listen to her lies. But Elias was staring at the wax, then at Avery's desk. At the row of bright red sticks, the pile of ribbons waiting to be tied. "Show me a real county seal," Elias said quiet. Avery's smile grew strained. "Now see here, show me." The clerk fumbled in his desk drawer, produced another document. This one's wax was deep red, nearly brown. The ribbon knot faced left. Pike stepped forward. "This proves nothing. Girl could have seen any paper." "No, sir." Mary's voice stayed steady. "I only seen county papers at the church. Preacher keeps them in the congregation ledger for reference. Land grants and such. The wax color's different because county uses old blood red. Clerk Avery's using bright red that ain't right for official documents." Elias picked up both papers, held them to the lamplight. The difference was clear as daylight. Thunder cracked overhead. Through the window, lightning split the sky like God's own signature. Avery's hand moved toward another drawer. "There's more evidence. Sit still," Elias said, voice carrying iron now. "Don't reach for nothing." Pike's mouth worked like a fish out of water. "Gray, you can't be believing a slave child over respectable men." "I'm believing my eyes." Elias set the papers down, looked at Mary. "How do you know all this?" "I remember what I see, Master Gray. Always have. Numbers, colors, faces." The preacher said it was a gift. Outside, the storm built to fury. Inside, 3 grown men stared at one small girl who had just unraveled their careful lies with nothing but perfect memory and a pure heart. Avery's hand trembled as he reached for a stick of red wax. The wrong red wax. Metal met wax, and the lie lost its shape. The storm hammered the courthouse roof like angry fists. In the dim office, shadows danced with each lightning flash. Mary sat quiet in her chains, watching the men's faces change as truth settled in the room like floodwaters slow. Then all at once, Elias held both papers to the lamplight again. The difference was stark as black and white. "How long you been forging county documents, Avery?" The clerk's Adam's apple bobbed. "I don't know what you mean." "Course you do." Elias set the papers down careful-like. "Question is why? What's in it for you?" Pike shifted his weight, boots scuffing the floor. His eyes darted to the door, measuring distance. "Don't even think it," Elias said without looking. "We're settling this proper." Mary watched Pike's hands clench and unclench. In the lamplight, she could see sweat beading on his forehead. Fear had a smell sharp and sour like milk gone bad. "Master Gray," she said soft, "the ledger numbers weren't just wrong. They were copied from somewhere else. Same hand that wrote this fake pass." Elias looked at her sharp. "Explain." "In your plantation book, the 6s and 9s got the same curl as this paper here. But when I went to Jameson's store with Dinah, I seen his ledger. His numbers are different. Straight-backed and careful. These here are fancy, like someone was showing off their penmanship." Pike made a sound like a trapped animal. "You're going to take a slave's word over mine? Over Avery here?" "I'm taking truth's word." Elias opened his ledger, ran his finger down the columns. "Show me, girl. Point out what you see." Mary leaned forward, chains clinking. "There, sir. See how the double entries are all in the same hand? Cotton sold to Charleston, then the same cotton sold to Savannah. Same bales, same dates. But look at the handwriting change between the real entries and the fake ones." Sure enough, the first entries were in different ink, different script. The doubled ones had Avery's flourishes, the same curls and loops as the forged pass. "Sweet Jesus," Elias breathed. "You've been stealing from me. Both of you." Avery stood sudden, knocking over his chair. "Now hold on. Sit down." The voice came from the doorway. Sheriff Hale stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat. "Heard there was trouble up here." Pike's hand moved toward his coat pocket. Quick as lightning, the sheriff's hand fell on his pistol grip. "Easy, Pike. Let's all stay calm." "Sheriff," Pike said, forcing a smile, "we got a runaway situation here. Girl's been helping fugitives, forging papers. We got proof." Sheriff Hale looked at the papers on the desk, looked at Mary and her chains, looked at the 3 men's faces. 20 years of law work had taught him to read guilt like a book. "Let me see this proof." Avery handed over the forged pass with shaking fingers. The sheriff studied it in the lamplight, then pulled a real county document from his jacket for comparison. "Wax is wrong," he said flat. Ribbons tied backwards. This here's a fake, sure enough. His eyes found Avery. Question is, who faked it? The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Rain hammered the roof. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. "The child can read?" Sheriff asked. "Yes, sir," Elias said. "Got perfect memory, too." "Then let her speak. Child, tell me what you see." Mary's voice came clear and steady. "Sheriff Hale, sir, that pass ain't Preacher Jonah's work. The handwriting's the same as the false entries in Master Gray's ledger, and I seen county documents at the church. Real ones use dark red wax and left-facing, knots. This here's made to look official, but it ain't." The sheriff nodded slow. "And the ledger? Double entry, sir. Same cotton sold twice on paper. Makes it look like Master Gray owes more money than he does. But the fake entries are all in the same hand as this pass." Pike's face had gone white as chalk. "Sheriff, you can't believe. I believe evidence." Sheriff Hale set down the papers, looked hard at Pike and Avery. "Seems to me like someone's been running a scheme. Forge documents to create false debts, then buy up land cheap when folks can't pay." Avery's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Pike's hand crept toward his pocket again. "Don't," the sheriff warned. "I'm already convinced you're guilty. Don't make it worse by resisting." Through the window, lightning split the sky. In its flash, Mary saw Pike's face twist with rage and desperation. She'd seen that look before on wild animals caught in traps. The moment stretched like taffy, then Pike lunged for the door. Sheriff Hale was faster. His hand caught Pike's collar, spun him around, and slammed him against the wall. "Going somewhere? You got no right," Pike snarled. "I'm a free white man." "You're a thief and a forger," the sheriff replied, calm as pond water. "And, likely worse." He snapped, iron cuffs around Pike's wrists. "Avery, you're next." The clerk had gone grey as old paper. "I was just... He made me. I didn't want to. Save it for the judge." Sheriff Hale cuffed him too, then turned to Elias. "Mr. Gray, I'll need you to come to the jail and make a statement. But first, let's get them chains off the child." "Sheriff," Elias said slow, "there's more to this than just forged documents. Girl's got information locked in her memory. Numbers, dates, details. She might be the key to unraveling the whole scheme." The sheriff looked at Mary with new respect. "That so, child?" "Yes, sir. I remember everything I see. Every number in Master Gray's ledger, every document at the preacher's church, every face and name and date." Pike struggled against his bonds. "She's lying. You can't trust a slave." "I'm trusting evidence," the sheriff repeated. "And right now, her evidence is worth more than your word." He pulled out his key ring, knelt beside Mary. "Let's get you free of these chains." The iron fell away from her wrists like shed skin. Mary rubbed the red marks on her arms, but her eyes stayed steady, watching the men's faces. "There's something else," she said quiet. "In the preacher's Bible. Something Mrs. Gray sewed into the margin before she died. Something about freedom papers." The room went dead still. Elias's face went white. "What kind of something?" Sheriff Hale asked, gentle. "A note, sir. Stitched into the binding with quilt thread. I seen it when the preacher was looking up a baptism date. Something about manumission papers for me and my little brother Josie. Contingent on Master Gray's oath." Pike started laughing high and wild like a loon on the water. "You hear that? She's claiming freedom papers. Next she'll be saying she owns the plantation." But Elias wasn't laughing. His face had gone strange, like a man remembering a dream. "Sarah did like her needlework," he said soft. "Always stitching notes in book margins, keeping her thoughts in thread and ink." He looked at Mary like he was seeing her for the first time. "Where exactly in the Bible?" "Book of Ruth, sir. Margin notes around the verses about staying loyal. The thread's blue, same color as..." She touched her sleeve where the ribbon was tucked. "Same color as your ribbon." Elias's voice was barely whisper. "Sarah gave you that ribbon." "Yes, sir. The day before the fever took her. She said I was to keep it safe, that it would remind me I belonged somewhere." Thunder rolled overhead like Judgment Day drums. In the lamplight, something shifted in Elias Gray's face. Something that had been hard as winter ground began to crack and thaw. "Sheriff," he said slow, "I need to see that Bible. Tonight." "Storm's getting worse," Sheriff Hale replied. "Better wait till morning." "No." Elias stood, decision hardening in his voice. I made a promise to the town, said I'd bring her back the love of my life if truth said so. Time to find out what truth says. Pike's laughter died. Gray, you gone soft in the head? She's property. You can't. I can do what conscience tells me. Elias looked at Miri, really looked at her. And my conscience is speaking pretty loud right now. Outside, the storm raged like the world was ending. Inside, in the circle of lamplight, 4 people sat with truth settling around them, like fog heavy and strange and impossible to ignore. Numbers aligned like rails, and a man's strength slipped between them. The hallway outside the clerk's office felt close as a tomb. Sheriff Hale marched Pike and Avery toward the jail cells, their boots echoing off stone walls. Elias walked behind, ledger tucked under his arm, thoughts churning like storm clouds. Miri followed quiet as a shadow, her freed hands strange and light without the chains. The red marks on her wrists were already fading, but the weight of what had been spoken hung heavier than iron. They were halfway down the hall when Elias stumbled. One step steady, the next like his legs were made of straw. His face went grey, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. Master Gray, Miri reached out instinctive, caught his arm as he swayed. I'm fine, he said, but his breathing had gone shallow, rapid. Just need to sit. There was no chair. Sheriff Hale turned at the sound, saw Elias leaning heavy against the wall. Pike, Avery, sit on that bench. Don't move. He stepped back to Elias. What's wrong? Don't know. Feel. Strange. Can't catch my breath. Miri studied his face in the dim light. Pale skin, lips tinged, blue, pulse fluttering at his throat like a trapped bird. She'd seen this before, when old Ned's heart had started giving out last summer. His heart's racing, she said quiet. Breathing too fast. He needs medicine. There's a doctor upstairs, Sheriff said. I'll fetch him. Wait. Miri touched Elias's wrist, counting beats against the seconds. 60, 80, 120. Too fast. He needs foxglove to slow it down, but careful dosing. Too much stops the heart altogether. Sheriff Hale stared at her. How do you know that? Nurse Tilda taught me. She comes to the quarters when folks get sick, says I got the touch for healing, same as I got for remembering. Pike snorted from his bench. Now she's claiming to be a doctor. What's next? Shut up, the sheriff snapped, then called upstairs. Doc Bell, need you down here. Footsteps hurried down the steps. Dr. Bell appeared a thin man with soft hands and wire spectacles. He took one look at Elias and frowned. Heart episode. Help me get him to my office. They half-carried Elias up the stairs to Dr. Bell's rooms above the courthouse. Shelves lined the walls, filled with bottles and jars, bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. The sharp smell of medicines hung thick as fog. Dr. Bell settled Elias in a chair, pressed fingers to his throat, listened to his chest through a wooden tube. Rapid pulse, shallow breathing. Could be exhaustion, could be his heart starting to fail. He moved to his medicine shelf, scanning labels. Need digitalis, but where? Ah, here. He pulled down a brown bottle, shook out white powder into a small tin cup. This much should do it. He was measuring a generous spoonful when Miri spoke up. Begging pardon, Dr. Bell, sir, but that's too much. The doctor turned, spectacles flashing. I beg your pardon. The digitalis, sir. That much would stop his heart, sure as poison. Quarter teaspoon for a man his size, no more. Young lady, I have been practicing medicine for 15 years. I hardly think... Look at the bottle, sir. Dr. Bell looked down at the label. In small print below the main text, someone had pinned a note with additional instructions. Miri read it aloud. Tincture digitalis quarter drop for weak pulse, half drop maximum dose. Signed, Dr. Montgomery, Charleston Medical College. The doctor's face went red, then white. His hand trembled as he set down the spoon. How did you read that? The writing's tiny. I see clear, sir, and I remember everything I read. Nurse Tilda always said to check the pinned notes, sometimes they got newer information than the bottle labels. Sheriff Hale looked from Miri to the doctor to the bottle. Doc, you want to follow the child's advice? Dr. Bell swallowed his pride with visible effort. Quarter teaspoon, you said? Yes, sir. Mixed in water, given slow. Then count his pulse at 30-second intervals till it steadies under 80 beats. The doctor prepared the dose with shaking hands. Mary knelt beside Elias, counted his pulse against her own heartbeat, while Dr. Bell administered the medicine. 110, 100, 95. She kept counting while Elias's breathing slowly deepened. 85, 80, 78. There. That's better. Elias blinked, color returning to his cheeks. Feel. Clearer now, like fog lifting. Dr. Bell stared at Mary with something like wonder. Where did you learn medical arts? Nurse Tilda, sir. She comes around when babies are born or folks get sick. Says healing and remembering go together. Can't help folks if you don't recall what worked before. Pike laughed ugly from the doorway, where Sheriff Hale kept him under guard. Next you'll be telling us she can raise the dead. Can't raise the dead, Mary said simple, but I can keep the living alive, if God wills it. Through the window, church bells began to ring, not the call to morning service, but the evening toll that summoned folks to Vespers. Dusk service at the country chapel, where Preacher Jonah kept his Bible with its blue-threaded secrets. Sheriff Hale checked his pocket watch. Storms clearing. We could make it to the chapel before full dark. Elias tried to stand, found his legs steady again. The Bible. Need to see what Sarah wrote. You sure you're strong enough? Dr. Bell asked. Strong enough for truth. Elias looked at Mary, something new in his eyes. Girl, you saved my life just now. That foxglove could have killed me. Yes, sir, but it didn't. No, it didn't. He was quiet a moment, thinking. Why'd you help me? After the chains, after dragging you to town to make an example of you. Mary considered the question serious as Sunday school. Because you needed help, sir. And because I think your heart's not as hard as you pretend it is. The room fell quiet except for the tick of the doctor's clock and the distant sound of bells calling faithful souls to evening worship. On the fourth beat, his chest answered. Evening light slanted gold through the chapel windows as they arrived in Sheriff Hale's wagon. The storm had blown itself out, leaving the air clean and cool, heavy with the scent of rain-washed earth. Preacher Jonah stood on the chapel steps, Bible tucked under his arm, watching their approach with eyes that missed nothing. Sheriff, Mr. Gray, his gaze found Mary, noted her freed hands, the way she sat straighter now. Child. Evening, preacher, Sheriff Hale said, climbing down from the driver's seat. Behind them, another wagon approached Mrs. Hart, the Quaker woman who ran the underground railroad station north of town, her husband Josiah at the reins. Heard you had some excitement in town today, Preacher Jonah said mild, but his eyes were sharp as winter stars. More than excitement, Elias replied. He helped Mary down from the wagon, his touch gentle as handling spun glass. Found out. I've been played for a fool. Ledger forged, documents faked, likely been going on for months. Pike and Avery, the preacher asked, both in jail. Sheriff Hale secured his team. Child here unraveled the whole scheme with nothing but perfect memory and keen eyes. Mrs. Hart approached, her plain dress rustling in the evening breeze. And now? Now we need to see your Bible, Elias said to the preacher. Mary says Sarah stitched something in the margins, something about freedom papers. Preacher Jonah's weathered face grew still. You sure you want to know what's written there? I made a promise to the town, said I'd bring her back the love of my life if truth demanded it. Time to let truth speak. The preacher nodded slow. Then come inside, all of you. Some truths are too important for just one pair of eyes. The chapel was small but sturdy, built of local stone with wooden pews that had held 3 generations of worshippers. Candles flickered in the growing dusk, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The smell of beeswax and old hymn books filled the air like incense. Preacher Jonah set his Bible on the reading table, opened it to the Book of Ruth. Even in the candlelight, Mary could see the blue thread woven through the margins, careful stitches that spelled out words in Sarah Gray's neat hand. Mrs. Hart, the preacher said, you knew Sarah well. You helped me read this. The Quaker woman leaned close, her finger tracing the thread-written words. It says, for my husband Elias should conscience wake in his heart. The children Mary and Josie are to receive manumission upon his free oath, witnessed by church and county seal. Let love be covenant, not possession. The words hung in the candlelit air like prayer. Elias gripped the back of a pew, knuckles white. She knew. Even before the fever took her, she knew this day would come. Mrs. Gray was a woman of deep sight, Mrs. Hart said gentle. She saw hearts as they could be, not as they were. Sheriff Hale leaned closer to examine the stitching. This looks genuine. Same thread as the child's ribbon, same neat hand I remember from church records. It's real, Mary said quiet. Mrs. Gray spent hours on her needlework. Said stitching helped her think, helped her see what needed doing. Elias stared at the Bible page like it held the secrets of the universe. Free oath. What does that mean? Means it has to come from your own heart. Preacher, Jonah replied. Can't be forced, can't be bought. Has to be freely given, witnessed by the community. And if I don't, if I keep them as property, then you keep them, Mrs. Hart said simple. But you also keep the weight of knowing what Sarah wanted, what she saw as possible. Outside, full darkness had settled over the countryside. Through the windows, they could see lanterns bobbing. Along the road, other neighbors, drawn by word of the day's events. The chapel was becoming a gathering place, a place where truth would be spoken before witnesses. Elias walked to the altar, stood with his back to the others. His voice came rough as sandpaper. I'd been angry so long. Angry at Sarah for dying, angry at the debts, angry at the world for taking everything I thought I owned. He turned, faced Mary. Angry at you for being the one thing she cared about more than me, some days. Mary's voice came steady as still water. She loved you, Master Gray. Talked about you all the time. How you used to read to her in the evenings, how you'd bring her flowers from the woods. Before the debts got bad, before I turned hard. She said, the hardness wasn't really you. Said it was just armor you put on when things got scary. Tears tracked down Elias's cheeks in the candlelight. She was right. About the armor. About the fear. He looked around the chapel, at the gathered faces. About what love should be. More footsteps on the chapel steps. Boatman Josiah entered, nodding to his wife. Behind him came Nurse Tilda, her herb bag slung over her shoulder, drawn by word that medical wisdom was needed. Heard the child saved a life today, she said to Mary. Proud of you, girl. You remembered the foxglove lessons. Yes, ma'am. Quarter dose. Careful timing. That's right. Healing's about precision and patience, not just knowing which herb to use. Sheriff Hale cleared his throat. We got a legal matter to settle here. If Mr. Gray chooses to honor his wife's written wishes, we'll need proper documentation. County seal, witnesses, all legal and binding. I got the seal right here, came a voice from the doorway. They turned to see a slight man in travel clothes, Mrs. Hart's brother-in-law, a Quaker from the county seat. Heard there was need for official business. He set a leather satchel on the reading table, withdrew the county seal press and a stick of proper dark red wax. If freedom papers need signing, they'll be legal as sunrise. Elias stared at the seal, pressed like it was a serpent. Once those papers are signed, there's no going back. That's the nature of freedom. Preacher, Jonah said gentle. It changes everything for everyone. What about the plantation? The debts? How do I run the place without slave labor? Mrs. Hart finished. Same way we do. Pay wages, treat folks with dignity, share the profits. It can be done, if the will is there. The cotton harvest will happen, Nurse Tilda said firm. Folks work better when they're working for themselves, for their families. You'll see. Mary spoke up, voice clear in the candlelit chapel. Master Gray, I don't want to leave the plantation. It's the only home I ever known. If you set me free, I'd like to stay. Work for wages, help with the books, maybe teach the other children to read and cipher. Elias looked at her, really looked, like he was seeing her for the first time. You'd stay? Even after today? After the chains? Yes, sir, because I believe what Mrs. Gray saw in you is true. The hardness ain't really you. The chapel fell quiet, except for the whisper of candle flames and the distant hoot of an owl. Everyone waited, watching Elias wrestle with the choice that would define the rest of his life. Finally, he walked to the reading table, picked up the Bible, read his wife's stitched words one more time. Love as covenant, not possession. He said slow, Sarah always was smarter than me. He set the Bible down, looked around the circle of faces. I need paper and ink. Got some documents to sign. Mrs. Hart smiled, the first real smile she'd worn all day. I'll fetch them from the wagon. As she went outside, the chapel bells began to ring, not the regular call to worship, but a special peal that announced important news to the countryside. Word would spread that something momentous was happening at the country chapel. Preacher Jonah lit more candles. Sheriff Hale examined the county seal to ensure everything would be legal. Nurse Tilda checked on Elias, making sure the heart episode hadn't left him weakened. And Mary sat quiet in the front pew, blue ribbon in her hands, thinking about the long road that had led from morning chains to evening freedom. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new ways of being in the world. But tonight, in the candlelit chapel with friends gathered around, truth was finally being spoken. Love was being redefined, and a small girl's perfect memory had become the key that unlocked a future none of them could have imagined. Threads and words lay side by side, both ready to be pulled. Mrs. Hart returned with paper, quill, and ink. The county official, Brother Samuel, she called him, prepared the documents with careful precision. Legal language that would transform lives, witnessed by a community that had gathered to see justice done. Before we begin, Preacher Jonah said, let's have proper introductions. Mary, tell Brother Samuel your full name for the records. Mary Rose Gray, sir. Mrs. Gray gave me the middle name when I learned to read the Bible. Brother Samuel dipped his quill. And your brother? Josie Gray, sir. He's not quite 3 years old. Lives in the quarters with Dinah, who's been his mama since our birth mother died. Any other family we should include in these papers? Elias spoke up. Dinah's earned her freedom too. Been caring for the household 20 years, raising children that weren't hers, never complained or caused trouble. I'll prepare papers for all 3, Brother Samuel said. Manumission and wage contracts both, if you're planning to keep them on as employees. I am. Elias's voice grew stronger with each word spoken. The plantation needs their skills, and they need security. Fair wages, decent housing, schooling for the children. Sheriff Hale nodded approval. That's the legal way to do it. Clear contracts, proper documentation. No room for misunderstanding. As Brother Samuel wrote, his quill scratching across the paper, more neighbors arrived. Word had spread through the countryside like wildfire. Farmers and shopkeepers, freedmen and servants, all drawn by the news that something extraordinary was happening at the chapel. Old Ned from the plantation forge limped in, his blacksmith's hands twisted with arthritis but his eyes bright with hope. Behind him came 3 young men from the quarters field hands, who'd known Mary since she was born. Is it true? Old Ned asked. The child's to be free. Free and adopted, Elias said, the words coming easier now. If she'll have me as a father. Mary looked up from her pew, blue ribbon still in her hands. Yes, sir. I'd be honored. More scratching of quill on paper. Brother Samuel worked methodically, creating legal documents that would stand up in any court in the land. We'll need signatures from witnesses, he said. At least 3, preferably more. I'll sign, Mrs. Hart said immediate. And I, added Preacher Jonah. Count me in, Sheriff Hale agreed. One by one, others stepped forward. Old Ned made his mark with a shaking hand. The young men from the quarters signed their names in careful letters. Even some of the white neighbors, farmers who'd known the Gray family for years, added their signatures to the documents. As the signing proceeded, Mary heard familiar music drifting through the windows, the sound of voices raised in harmony, singing the old hymns she'd learned as a child. The community was celebrating, giving voice to joy that had been too long suppressed. Brother Samuel finished writing, set down his quill. Documents are ready. Mr. Gray, you'll sign first, then the witnesses. Elias took the quill with steady hands. As he signed his name to the manumission papers, he spoke the words that would echo in memory forever. I, Elias Gray, do hereby grant freedom to Mary Rose Gray, Josie Gray, and Dinah Washington, and welcome Mary as my adopted daughter before God and this community. The word love hung in the rafters like a bell strike that would not fade. As the ink dried on the freedom papers, Sheriff Hale prepared the county seal. The dark red wax melted over a candle flame, dripping onto the parchment like drops of holy blood. When he pressed the seal, it left a perfect impression the county's crest, clear and legal and unforged. "There," Brother Samuel said, examining the seal. "Legal in all respects. These papers will stand up in any court, before any judge." But even as the official business concluded, tension crackled in the air like lightning before a storm. Through the chapel windows, they could see torches moving along the road, too many torches, moving too fast. "Trouble coming," Sheriff Hale said, grim, hand moving to his pistol. The chapel door burst open. Pike stood there, chains broken, face twisted with rage. Behind him, 3 patrollers with guns and torches. "How'd he get free?" Sheriff Hale demanded. "Avery had a spare key," Pike snarled. "Amazing what a man will do to save his own neck." His eyes found Miri, burning with hatred. "Now we're going to finish what we started. No slave's going to make fools of white men." "She's not a slave," Elias said, stepping protectively in front of Miri. "Papers are signed and sealed. She's free." "Papers can burn," Pike replied, raising his torch. "And so can the people who signed them." The patrollers spread out, blocking the exits. The chapel filled with the smell of smoke and fear. But Miri wasn't afraid. Her mind was working, counting exits, measuring distances, remembering every verse of the old hymn that had guided them safely through one crisis already. "Master Gray," she said quiet, "remember the song I was humming this morning? The one with 17 verses? Elias nodded, confused. "It's not just a map for roads. It's a map for hiding places, safe houses, escape routes." She looked around the chapel, counting heads. "We got maybe 30 people here. Too many to fight, but the song knows where to go." "What are you talking about?" Pike demanded. Miri began to hum, soft and low. The melody that had marked their journey to town, the verses that painted pictures of landmarks and safe havens. Asterisk, when the torches burn too bright, seek the cellar's hidden light. Asterisk, miss us. Hart's eyes went wide with understanding. The old root cellar. Behind the chapel, asterisk, stone steps down to cooling ground, where the faithful can be found. Asterisk, she's talking about the underground railroad station. Sheriff Hale realized. The safe house. Pike raised his gun. Nobody's going nowhere. But Preacher Jonah was already moving, pressing a hidden latch behind the altar. A section of the floor swung up, revealing stone steps leading down into darkness. "The old cellar," he said. "Built when the chapel was new, case of Indian raids, big enough for everyone." "Move," Sheriff Hale commanded. "Women and children first." Pike's shot echoed off the stone walls, but he was aiming at shadows. The chapel was already emptying through the hidden entrance, families disappearing into the earth like seeds planted for future harvest. Miri was the last to descend, turning at the entrance to see Pike and his men ransacking the chapel above. The Freedom Papers, Brother Samuel had them safely tucked in his coat. The county seal Sheriff Hale carried it in his satchel. The documents that proclaimed her freedom were safe, even if the building burned. In the cool darkness of the cellar, 30 people waited in silence. The sound of boots and shouts echoed overhead. Glass broke as windows were smashed. The smell of smoke began to seep through the floorboards. "They're burning the chapel," someone whispered. "Let them," Preacher Jonah replied, steady as stone. "Buildings can be rebuilt. People can't be replaced." Above them, Pike's voice roared with frustration. "Where are they? They can't have just disappeared." But they had, vanished into the earth like mist at sunrise, protected by the same network that had sheltered runaway slaves for 20 years. The underground railroad that Miri's hymn song had mapped out verse by verse, landmark by landmark. In the darkness, Elias found Miri's hand. "You knew," he said, wonder in his voice. "You knew about the hiding places." "Yes, sir. The song taught them to me, long before I understood what they meant." "Who taught you the song?" "Preacher Jonah, sir. And before him, other preachers. And before them," she smiled in the darkness, "I think maybe the song taught itself, passed from heart to heart, voice to voice, till it found someone who needed it." Above them, the sounds of destruction continued. But below, in the safety of stone and earth, freedom papers were signed, love was redefined, and a small girl's perfect memory had become the key to survival itself. The cellar held them until dawn, when Pike's torches burned out and his rage exhausted itself against empty air. And when they finally emerged, Stepping into morning sunlight through a different entrance half a mile away, they found the chapel still standing, scorched but not destroyed, wounded but not broken. Like the people it sheltered, the building had survived the fire, wax cooled, holding a crest like a memory that would not warm away. Dawn broke grey and cool over the countryside, mist rising from the fields like the breath of the earth itself. The chapel stood scarred but intact, its stone walls blackened by smoke, broken windows gaping like wounded eyes. But the hidden cellar had done its work. 30 souls had found sanctuary in the darkness and emerged unharmed with the first light. Sheriff Hale picked through the debris on the chapel floor, his face grim as winter. Pike and his men cleared out before sunrise, left their torches burning in the road like some kind of warning. "Warning received," Elias replied, helping Preacher Jonah assess the damage. Hymn books scattered and torn, pews overturned, the altar cloth reduced to ash. "Question is, what do we do about it?" Brother Samuel checked his coat pocket, made sure the Freedom Papers were still secure. "First thing is to get these documents recorded at the county seat. Once they're in the official ledger, Pike can't touch them." "I'll ride with you," Sheriff Hale offered. "Make sure you get there safe." Mrs. Hart surveyed the chapel with practical eyes. "Windows can be replaced, books can be rebound. The important thing is no one was hurt." Mary stood in the doorway, looking at the destruction. Her blue ribbon fluttered in the morning breeze somehow. In all the chaos, it had stayed secure in her hair. "The song worked," she said quiet. "Kept everyone safe, just like it was supposed to." "That song saved our lives," old Ned agreed, leaning heavy on his walking stick. "Never knew a hymn could be a map." "Lots of things in the world are maps," Mary replied, thoughtful. "If you know how to read them. Stars, bird flights, the way water flows, all pointing toward something." Elias looked at her with new eyes. "What's your song pointing toward now?" Mary tilted her head, listening to something only she could hear. "Home, Master Gray. Time to go home." They gathered their belongings and prepared for the journey back to the plantation. The legal documents were secure, the freedom official. But the hardest work still lay ahead, learning how to live with new definitions of family, freedom, and responsibility. The wagon wheels creaked along the familiar road, but everything felt different now. Miri sat beside Elias instead of chained between captors. Her wrists bore no iron marks, her voice was free to sing the old hymn openly. Asterisk road winds home through morning mist. Every mile by grace has kissed. Asterisk, other wagons joined their procession as word spread. Neighbors who wanted to witness the homecoming, friends who'd signed the Freedom Papers, curiosity seekers drawn by the extraordinary events of the past day. By the time they reached the plantation gates, a small crowd had gathered in the yard, field hands and house servants, children and elders, all waiting to see what changes the dawn would bring. Dinah stood on the porch steps, little Josie balanced on her hip. The toddler's eyes were wide with sleep and confusion, but Dinah's face showed the strain of a long night spent wondering and worrying. "Miri," she called out. "That really you, baby girl?" "Yes, ma'am," Miri replied, climbing down from the wagon. "It's me, and I got papers to prove I'm free," the crowd murmured, voices mixing excitement with uncertainty. Freedom was a word that carried weight in slave quarters, a dream talked about in whispers and sung about in coded verses. Elias stood on the porch, looking out at the faces watching him. Workers who'd known him as master, neighbors who'd seen him drag a child to town in chains, family who'd trusted him with their hopes and fears. "Folks," he said, voice carrying across the yard, "yesterday I made a fool's mistake. Let anger and fear cloud my judgment, treated this child like she was less than human." He gestured to Miri. "Today I'm here to make it right." He pulled out the Freedom Papers, unfolded them for all to see. "These documents, signed and sealed legal, declare Miri Rose Gray, Josie Gray, and Dinah Washington to be free citizens, no longer property, but family." Gasps rippled through the crowd, some of joy, some of disbelief. "Furthermore," Elias continued, "this plantation will operate on new terms: wages for work, schooling for children, decent housing and medical care for all. The days of chains and whips are over." Old Ned's voice cracked with emotion. "You mean it, Master Gray? Real wages and real freedom?" "I mean it." And Ned, you don't call me master anymore. Elias will do fine. Dinah climbed down from the porch, still carrying Josie, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Mary, child, is this real? Are we really free? Free as birds, Dinah. And you know what the best part is? Mary grinned, reaching out to hug the woman who'd been more mother than mistress. I'm staying. Going to help run this place proper, teach the children to read and cipher. Little Josie reached for Mary with chubby arms, babbling something that might have been her name. She took him from Dinah, spun him around until he giggled. Hey there, little brother, you're free too. Got papers that say so. The crowd was warming now, voices growing louder with questions and exclamations, but underneath the celebration, Mary could sense uncertainty. Freedom was wonderful, but it also meant responsibility. Change was necessary, but it was also scary. Sheriff Hale rode into the yard, his horse lathered with sweat. Elias, got news from town. Pike's been caught, trying to board a riverboat with a satchel full of forged documents. Avery's singing like a church choir, telling everything he knows about the scheme. What scheme exactly? Elias asked. Bigger than we thought. They've been forging debts for half the county, buying up land cheap when folks couldn't pay. Your plantation was just one target among many. Mrs. Hart's husband Josiah nodded grim. Explains a lot. Wondered why so many good families were losing their farms. Pike had names, dates, amounts. Looks like he was planning to sell your land to cotton speculators from up north, Sheriff Hale continued. You stopping him probably saved a dozen other families from ruin. Elias felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. What happens now? Trial, restitution, jail time for the guilty parties. Your debts are cleared, most of them were fake anyway. And there's talk of compensation for the damages Pike caused. The news sent another wave of murmurs through the crowd. Justice being done, wrongs being righted, the truth finally coming to light. But even as the legal matters sorted themselves out, Mary knew the real work was just beginning. Freedom papers were one thing, building a new kind of community was another. Folks, she said, her young voice somehow carrying the authority of someone much older, we got us a chance here. Chance to show the world that people can live different, work together, treat each other with respect regardless of color. Easy to say, one of the field hands called out. Hard to do when the whole world's watching, waiting for us to fail. Then we don't fail, Mary replied, simple. We work hard, treat each other right, and prove that freedom makes people stronger, not weaker. Preacher Jonah, who'd ridden out with the sheriff, climbed onto the porch steps. The child speaks wisdom. Change is hard, but God doesn't give us burdens we can't carry. This plantation can be an example, a place where the kingdom of heaven touches earth. Pretty words. Another voice called. But what about the practical matters? Wages, housing, schooling? How do we make it all work? Elias looked to Mary, saw the confidence in her eyes, the steady certainty that had carried her through chains and courthouse drama. We figure it out as we go, he said. One day at a time, one problem at a time, and we figure it out together. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. In the growing warmth, plans began to take shape. Work schedules that allowed time for learning, housing improvements funded by the compensation money, a schoolhouse to be built behind the quarters. As the crowd began to disperse, returning to chores and responsibilities, Mary found herself alone with Elias on the front porch. The blue ribbon in her hair caught the sunlight, fluttering like a small flag of freedom. Scared? Elias asked. Some, she admitted. Big changes, always scary. But excited too. Feels like we're writing a new story, one nobody's written before. Your memory will help. Knowing what worked in the past, what didn't. Yes, sir. But memory's not enough by itself. Got to have hope too. Got to believe things can be better than they were. Elias nodded, looking out over the fields where free workers would soon plant and harvest cotton under a new system of dignity and fair wages. Sarah would be proud, he said soft. Of both of us. I think so too. Mary touched the ribbon in her hair. She always said love was stronger than fear, if you gave it a chance to grow. The morning stretched ahead of them, full of possibility and challenge in equal measure. Freedom papers were signed, justice was being done, and a new kind of family was taking shape on an old plantation. But the real test would come in the days and weeks ahead, as they learned to live up to the promises they'd made and the hopes they'd raised. Ink shone like wet wheat under a late sun. The afternoon brought visitors from neighboring plantations, drawn by news that spread faster than wildfire through the county. Some came from curiosity, others from concern, a few from genuine interest in what Elias Gray was attempting. Master Whitmore from the adjoining property rode up with two of his overseers, their faces showing skepticism mixed with worry. "Gray," Whitmore called from his horse, not bothering to dismount. "Heard you've lost your mind. Freeing slaves, promising wages. You'll ruin us all with such foolishness." Elias stepped to the edge of the porch, Miri at his side. "Just trying to live by Christian principles, Whitmore. Treat others as I'd want to be treated." "Christian principles don't harvest cotton," one of the overseers snorted. "What happens when word spreads? When every slave in the county gets ideas about freedom? Then maybe it's time for those ideas," Miri said quiet, but her voice carried clearly across the yard. Whitmore's face reddened. "You letting a child, a former slave, speak for you now?" "I'm letting wisdom speak, regardless of its source," Elias replied steady. "And this child has more wisdom in her little finger than some grown men have in their whole bodies." The visitors muttered among themselves, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. But before anyone could respond, another rider approached Judge Blackwood from the circuit court, a man whose word carried weight throughout the region. "Afternoon, gentlemen," the judge said, dismounting with the careful movements of advanced age. "Heard there were some interesting developments here. Thought I'd see for myself." "Judge," Elias nodded respectfully, "come to check if my freedom papers are legal?" "Among other things." Judge Blackwood climbed the porch steps, his keen eyes taking in every detail. "May I see the documents?" Brother Samuel had left copies before returning to the county seat. Elias produced them, watched as the judge examined the wax seals, the witness signatures, the careful legal language. "Everything appears in order," Judge Blackwood said finally, "properly witnessed, correctly sealed, legally binding." He looked at Miri with interest. "You're the child who exposed the forgery scheme?" "Yes, sir. Just remembered what I seen, pointed out what didn't match. Remarkable memory, I'm told. You can recall exact figures, dates, details." "Yes, sir. Always could, far back as I remember." Judge Blackwood nodded thoughtfully. "Such a gift could be valuable in legal proceedings. We'll be needing witnesses for Pike and Avery's trial. She'll testify," Elias said. "Truth deserves to be heard." Whitmore shifted uncomfortably. "Judge, surely you're not going to take a child's word, a slave child in a court of law." "Former slave," the judge corrected mildly. "Free citizen now, according to these papers. And if her memory is as accurate as Sheriff Hale reports, her testimony will be crucial." The legal validation seemed to deflate some of the visitors' bluster. If Judge Blackwood approved the freedom papers, there was little room for argument. As the afternoon wore on, more neighbors arrived, some hostile, some curious, others genuinely supportive. The Hartwell family from downriver, known abolitionists who'd been waiting years for someone to take a stand. Dr. Morrison from town, interested in Miri's medical knowledge. Even a reporter from the county newspaper, scribbling notes about the unusual events. Through it all, Miri moved easily between groups, answering questions, explaining the new arrangements, demonstrating the reading and ciphering skills that had impressed so many adults. Her natural intelligence, combined with perfect memory and genuine warmth, gradually won over even some skeptics. As evening approached, most visitors departed, leaving the plantation family to gather on the porch and plan their future. The freedom papers might be signed, but the practical work of building a new kind of community was just beginning. "First thing," Elias said, "we need to set up proper wage scales. Fair pay for fair work, with bonuses for good harvests. And schooling," Miri added. "Children need education if they're going to make good choices as adults." Dinah bounced little Josie on her knee. "Housing needs improvement too. Some of the cabins are falling down, roofs leaking. Medical care," Nurse Tilda suggested. "Regular visits, medicine supplies, training for folks to handle common problems." Old Ned spoke up from his chair by the door. "What about the other plantations? Folks still in chains, still suffering under overseers like Pike?" The question hung heavy in the evening air. They all knew that freedom for a few meant little if the system of bondage continued everywhere else. "One step at a time, Mrs. Hart said, gentle. "Show that freedom works, that treating people with dignity makes everyone stronger. Example speaks louder than words." "But we can't just ignore the suffering," Mary insisted. Maybe the Underground Railroad could use a new station, a place where folks could rest, get supplies, find guidance." Elias looked at her with something between pride and worry. "That would be dangerous. Harboring runaways is a federal crime." "So was forging documents," Mary replied. "But that didn't stop Pike and Avery. Sometimes you have to risk the law to serve justice." The adults exchanged glances, recognizing the moral complexity of their situation. Freedom was precious, but it carried responsibilities they were still learning to understand. As full darkness settled over the plantation, lanterns were lit and plans took shape. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new tests of their commitment to the principles they'd embraced. But tonight, on the porch of a house that had been transformed from a place of bondage to a place of freedom, hope flickered bright as candle flames. The blue ribbon in Mary's hair caught the lantern light, fluttering like a flag of a new country that existed nowhere yet, but in the hearts of those brave enough to dream it into being. Voices braided where knots once lived. 3 months later, the first snow of winter dusted the fields where free workers had harvested the finest cotton crop the plantation had ever produced. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Freedom had made the land more productive, not less, as motivated workers outpaced the old system of forced labor by margins that impressed even the skeptics. Mary stood at her bedroom window, her own room now, in the main house where Elias had insisted she belong as his adopted daughter. The view showed the new schoolhouse, its windows glowing with lamplight as evening classes continued for adults learning to read. Beyond that, the renovated quarters with their solid roofs and glazed windows, smoke rising from chimneys where free families gathered around their own hearths. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Elias entered, carrying a letter with official seals. His face showed a mixture of pride and concern that had become familiar over the months of change. "News from the county seat," he said, settling into the chair beside her desk. "Judge Blackwood wants you to testify in the appeals court. Pike's case is going all the way to the state Supreme Court." Mary set down her pen she'd been writing in the plantation ledger, recording the wages paid, the profits shared, the new contracts signed with neighboring merchants impressed by their quality cotton and ethical practices. "What kind of testimony?" "Your memory of the forged documents, the false entries, the whole scheme. The defense is claiming Pike was just following orders, that bigger men were behind the forgeries. Were they?" Elias nodded grim. "Looks that way. Cotton speculators from up north, working with local clerks and overseers to steal land cheap. Pike was small potatoes compared to the real criminals." Mary considered this, her mind already cataloguing the details she'd observed, the patterns she'd recognized. "When does the court meet?" "Spring session. But Mary," he paused, choosing words careful, "the defense will try to discredit you. Say a child can't be trusted, that former slaves have reason to lie. It won't be easy." "Truth is truth," she replied, simple. "Doesn't matter who speaks it. I know. But the world doesn't always see it that way." A commotion in the yard below drew their attention to the window. Riders approaching in the gathering darkness, lanterns bobbing like fireflies. But these weren't visitors. The horses were labored, the pace urgent. "Trouble," Mary said, recognizing the signs. They hurried downstairs to find Sheriff Hale dismounting, his face grave in the lamplight. Behind him rode Mrs. Hart and her brother Samuel, their Quaker clothes dusty from hard travel. "What's wrong?" Elias asked. "Slave catchers," Sheriff Hale replied. "Federal marshals with warrants, hunting runaways. Heard there's a new Underground Railroad station operating in these parts." Mrs. Hart's eyes were bright with urgency. "They're close, maybe an hour behind us. Got 12 souls hidden in the root cellar at our place, including 3 children. Need to move them tonight." Elias looked around the yard, calculating risks. The plantation had indeed become an unofficial station, providing food, rest, and guidance to freedom seekers. But harboring fugitives was a federal crime, punishable by heavy fines and imprisonment. "How many marshals?" he asked. "6, with dogs. Local, patrollers backing them up. They got authority to search any property, question any person." Miri stepped forward, her young voice carrying surprising authority. "We can hide them. Got places, the song taught me, places even the dogs won't find." "Song?" Sheriff Hale looked confused. "The old hymn, 17 verses mapping safe spots all through this country. Root cellars, cave systems, hidden rooms. The Underground Railroad's been using them for 20 years. Mrs. Hart nodded urgent. "She's right. The song saved dozens of lives." But Elias was thinking of the legal consequences, the risk to everyone on the plantation. If they were caught harboring runaways, all their progress could be lost. The Freedom Papers wouldn't protect them from federal law. "Papa," Miri said. She'd started calling him that after the adoption papers were filed. "What would Mrs. Gray have done?" The question hit like a physical blow. Elias could almost see Sarah standing beside him, her face serene but determined. "She'd have hidden them," he said quiet. "Cost be damned." "Then we hide them," Miri replied. "And we do it right." The next hour was controlled chaos. The refugees arrived, men, women, and children, wearing the hollow-eyed look of people who'd traveled far on little food and less sleep. Among them, Miri recognized faces from other plantations, folks who'd heard about the Gray place through the whispered networks that carried news faster than telegraphs. "Welcome," she told them, her voice warm despite the urgency. "You're safe here. Got hiding places even the devil couldn't find." She led them through the darkness, following paths marked by the verses of her song, not to the obvious spots like barns or cellars, but to the hidden places the hymn had revealed: a cave system behind the spring house, a hollow under the chapel floor's false foundation, spaces that connected underground like the roots of ancient trees. Asterisk, when the hounds bay in the night, seek the stones that hold no sight. Asterisk, the refugees disappeared into the earth like seeds planted for future harvest. 12 souls finding sanctuary while federal marshals rode hard through the darkness, following false trails and empty leads. By the time the law arrived, the plantation looked peaceful as a Sunday morning. Workers in their cabins, family on the porch, everything exactly as it should be on a winter evening. Marshal Crawford rode up with his men, their badges gleaming in the lantern light. Behind them came local patrollers, including some faces Miri recognized from Pike's old crew. "Evening," Crawford called, not bothering to dismount. "U.S. Marshal, on federal business. Got warrants for runaway slaves, reason to believe they passed through here." Elias stepped forward, Freedom Papers folded in his pocket. "Marshal, what can we do for you? Search the premises, question your people, standard procedure. Of course, though I should mention, all our workers are free citizens now. Got documents to prove it." Crawford's eyebrows rose. "All of them?" "Every last one. We operate on wage labor now, have for months." This wasn't what the marshal had expected. Slave plantations were supposed to have slaves, not free workers with legal papers. It complicated his search considerably. "Still need to look around," he insisted. "Runaways could be hiding anywhere." "Look all you want," Elias agreed. "Just remember, my people have rights now. Can't question them without cause, can't search their homes without warrants." The marshals spread out, checking barns and outbuildings, using their dogs to sniff for unfamiliar scents. But the refugees were well hidden, their presence masked by the complex scent trails of a working plantation. Miri watched from the porch, her memory cataloging every detail of the search. The pattern of the dogs' movement, the locations they checked, the methods they used. Information that could protect future refugees, help them avoid detection. One of the patrollers approached the porch, a man she recognized as Webb, the same who'd jeered when Elias first brought her to town in chains. "You," he said, pointing at Miri. "Little property that thinks she's free. Remember you from courthouse." "I am free," Miri replied steady. "Got papers to prove it." Webb spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Papers can be faked. Seen it before. Not these papers. Judge Blackwood himself approved them." The mention of the respected judge gave Webb pause, but he wasn't finished needling. "Free or not, you best remember your place. Don't think that paper makes you equal to white folks." Elias started to step forward, but Mary's hand on his arm stopped him. "Mr. Webb," she said, her voice carrying a dignity that made the patroller's bluster look petty, "I know exactly what I am. I'm a free citizen of these United States, a daughter in a loving family, and a person with gifts that help others. What are you?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Webb's face reddened, but he had no answer that wouldn't diminish him further. The search continued for 2 hours, turning up nothing but legitimate plantation business. No hidden slaves, no evidence of Underground Railroad activity, nothing to justify federal intervention. Finally, Marshal Crawford called his men together. "Nothing here. We'll try the Morrison place next." As the lawmen rode away, the plantation exhaled like a held breath finally released. But they weren't safe, yet the refugees needed to continue north before dawn, before other searches could be organized. Mary gathered the hidden people from their sanctuaries, checked them for injuries or illness, prepared food packets for their journey. In the darkness before dawn, she stood with them at the edge of the property, pointing out the landmarks that would guide them to the next safe station. "Follow the North Star till you reach the 3 Oak Grove," she instructed. "Mrs. Patterson there will give you shelter and supplies. Tell her Mary Gray sent you." One of the refugee children, a girl about her own age, grabbed her hand. "Why you help us? You could get in trouble." Mary thought of Sarah Gray's words, stitched in blue thread in the margins of an old Bible. "Love as covenant, not possession. Because freedom's not worth much if it's only for some folks," she said simple. "Got to be for everyone, or it's not really freedom at all." The refugees melted into the darkness like morning mist, carrying with them the hope that had sustained them through hundreds of dangerous miles. Behind them, they left a plantation transformed into something the world had never seen before, a place where freedom was practiced, not just preached. As dawn broke over the cotton fields, Mary stood on the porch beside the fresh seal, impression that hung by the door. The chain that had once bound her lay coiled beneath it like a shed snakeskin, a reminder of what had been and what would never be again. The morning brought new challenges, new choices, new opportunities to live up to the principles they'd embraced, but also new hope, new possibilities, new examples of what America could become if it chose to honor its founding promises. In the distance, church bells began to ring, not in alarm, but in celebration of another Sunday morning in a free country that was slowly learning what freedom really meant. On the porch, beneath the new seal, a small blue ribbon fluttered like a flag of a new country that existed wherever hearts chose love over fear, covenant over possession, and truth over convenient lies.